Presenting as 5 quick bites to innovate in software testing. Rajini is a senior director of engagement who leads the engagement management for some of InfoTech's largest and most strategic accounts. She has 12 years of professional experience primarily in the software quality assurance, and she advocates software quality through evangelistic activities including blogging on test trends, technologies, and best practices. She is also an active speaker in conferences run by SQE and QA STC. Over to you.
Can you guys hear me fine? Awesome. So always interesting to be the first session of the day, sort of setting the pace in terms of hopefully I will do this. Pardon me for my dark throat, loving to pass on to you in between. So I'll try to be as clear as possible. So this is my second year here at STC, so firstly, very excited to be seeing you all. And when I was invited to speak and I was thinking about what topic do I take to the audience today, I said, why don't I align it with the main theme of the conference, which is basically bringing in agility and innovation in software testing. And so I said, when I bring in this topic on innovation, let me focus on 5 core ideas. Instead of talking about innovation at large, let me go in with 5 clear messages that we've all been trying, actually at InfoTech. In my company, for the last few months, we've been trying these ideas. We've been seeing good results, and said, why don't I take that to the testing community out here? So hopefully we'll be able to take some of these messages to the other testing groups as well. So if you look at the flow of my presentation, I've divided it into 3 main sections. I'll first start talking about why innovate. In any discipline for that matter, why do we innovate? I'll talk specifically about why innovate in software testing. Then quickly I'll move on to the second section, which is the focal section of the presentation, those 5 ideas. And I'll wrap it up mapping these 5 ideas to the 5 C's, which are important for the success of any organization's strategy. The 5 C's of context, collaboration, customer, competition, and company. So I'll map my 5 ideas to these 5 C's. So that's the overall flow. So with that, I'll start off with why innovate. Firstly, what is innovation? To me, in very simple terms, innovation means experiencing ongoing continuous improvement. As simple as that, we getting better, getting more effective, getting more productive at what we do. And oftentimes we've heard this proverb saying necessity is the mother of invention, innovation, all such things. But I come here with a very strong belief that while necessity is important, that's not the only driver when it comes to innovation. There are a lot of other factors also that come into innovation. And to me, this matrix sort of was simple yet comprehensive, covering it up in terms of, covering it fully comprehensively in terms of why really innovate. So if you see along the vertical axis, you have competition and recovery. Along the horizontal, you have circumstantial and visionary. So this applies not just to organizations, but even to us as individuals, where we can easily plot ourselves here to see where exactly we belong and where we actually need to get to. So to explain that, I'll give you 2 examples today. We all know Apple's story, how troubled an organization it was a couple of decades back. Really struggling to survive, and it got a much needed funding of $150 million from Microsoft. So at that point of time, Apple was really in the recovery circumstance. It was in a forced situation. If it had to survive, it had to do something to really survive, pull itself out of danger. So that's where it started. And from there, it quickly moved on to the recovery visionary situation. Because at that point in time, clearly Apple did not have any competition per se in the mobile computing space. And from there, it moved into the competitive visionary state. So if you're looking at really the least ideal situation, least ideal quadrant for any organization or any individual to be in is going to be the recovery circumstantial. The best situation or the most ideal situation to be in is competitive and visionary, where we have competition, but amidst that competition, we're able to set ourselves apart as a visionary. So that's the part Apple really took. We take one more example, 3M. We all know, how popular, how what leader 3M is in the field of stationery products. But whereas a few decades back, 3M also was a struggling organization, Minnesota Manufacturing and Mining Company. And what it did was a complete restructuring of its business. So it started again in the recovery and circumstantial, but went into a zone where there was competition, moved into competitive visionary, and from there went into the competitive and visionary situation. So the thing to keep in mind, what 3M did differently was, it said, I'm going to set aside 15% of every employee's time to really innovate in the organization. And to give you an example, the popular sticky notes that we all use, that was actually an idea by an employee in that 15% time that was set aside for him. So the message here that I'm trying to drive away with is, what are those key ingredients for innovation? Firstly, an open culture is very, very important. I think oftentimes we have a perception that innovation is restricted to the R&D division of the organization. That mindset has to change. For instance, again in Google, 20% of every employee's time is set aside for innovation. Google is driven by a 4E charter of earn, entice, expand, and experiment. And of these 4 E's, the E on experiment, which is what drives innovation, is a very powerful E that feeds into the other 3 E's. So firstly, let's see how we can bring in that open culture to innovate. The second thing is, oftentimes we don't innovate because we fear we may fail. So one thing we have to be clear is, we may not always succeed. As we innovate, we may fail, that's okay. Bill Gates in fact calls success to be a lousy teacher. Failure teaches much better things to us and gives us much better experiences. So it's okay to fail. But obviously we want to set ourselves in the path of success. To be able to do that, make sure your innovation, whatever you do, is aligned with the market, is forward-looking, so that you're not randomized in your area. And finally, passion is very important, especially in large organizations. Oftentimes what happens is there's the syndrome called the FDH syndrome that's developing. We start this feeling saying it's a large organization, what I do or what I don't is really not going to impact the big scheme of things. So people tend to become fat, dumb, and happy, not in the literal sense, but really fat, dumb, and happy. To break that, I think passion is very, very important. So at the end of this first section, let's very clearly walk away with the message that necessity is not what always powers innovation. There are a bunch of other things that power innovation. To bring in that agility, to bring in that resilience, to bring in true creativity. So that's my first one. The second message, let's move on specific to the testing community. Let's specifically start looking at ideas. Why do we want to innovate as testers? Very self-explanatory comment here. I'm not going to discuss each of them in detail. But for a quick look, we want to innovate as testers because we want to embrace new technologies, new trends that are out there in the market. Secondly, we want to get more effective, we want to get better at what we're doing. Thirdly, we want to get better in terms of connecting with our end customers. We want to better empower the rest of our product team own quality. And we as testers also want to experience ongoing continuous improvement. So this, to my mind, seems to be the top reasons as to why we as testers want to innovate. And I call these bites, not just the quick bites, I call them the wholesome bites, because I really want to cover thoughts and processes, techniques, trends. So those are where I want to map my 5 ideas. I'll quickly start discussing these 5 ideas. And as I start, sort of a quick disclaimer here. So for each of these ideas, in the interest of time, I'm just going to cover 4 things. I'm going to talk about what is the need, what is the problem statement for the idea, what is the solution, what are some best practices, and what is the potential outcome. These are the 4 things I'm going to cover. And as I said, each of these 5 ideas were actually presented in my organization a couple of months back at our annual technical conference. So each of these were taken up as individual 1-hour topics of their own. A couple of them actually were presented in the conference yesterday in graduate tracks. So if any of you want further details on each of these ideas, we'll be happy to talk to it or respond. So with that, let me move on to the first idea. Promote thinking taps. So what is a need here? What is a problem statement? We all as testers are great at what we do day in and day out. We keep doing our activities. how often, just raise your hands, how often have we heard this message saying from our clients or from our managers, I want you to think out of the box. I want you to do things differently. So there we go. We often hear this message, and I personally wondered myself, what does it mean? It's such a subjective statement in terms of think out of the box. So here is one such idea which will hopefully help us think out of the box and think holistically. This idea is actually based on a book by Edward D. Bono, very successful book that was published in 1985 called The Six Thinking Hats. And what he says is, any problem, any situation that we address, why don't we bring in a multi-dimensional thinking? And for this, why don't we bring in the multicolored caps? So he says blue is for promoting better context. White helps you look at the data you have, information you have to solve any problem. Red wants you to really think about your gut. What is my gut in addressing a certain situation? Yellow for optimism, black for the devil's advocate, the pessimistic angle, and green to promote creativity. So don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this is a magic hat. As soon as you start wearing this hat, all ideas are going to flow into your head. It's just going to force you to start thinking in each of these directions, as opposed to just doing your same stuff over and over again. So you may also ask me, hey, we are really busy in our day-to-day things. How do we really take time aside? Say, okay, today I've got to start thinking from these 6 colors. Tomorrow again, these 6 colors. So there are fun ways in which you can actually do this. For instance, let's say a release is 2 weeks long. And as a team, why don't you collectively say, hey, first 2 days, let's as a team start looking at the product from a blue angle. The next 2 days, let's look at it from a white angle. So why don't you make it a team exercise? Just for instance, in Saregama, we have a theme week. So this theme is going to be on Carnatic songs. This week is going to be Western songs. So why don't you promote such an idea, saying every few days, as a team, we're going to collectively look at specific colors. Or say, for instance, Deepika may be very creative on the team. So we could say, let Deepika look at it from a green color, say this particular release. Or say, usually I'm optimistic, but now, Rajini, this release, I want you to also look at it from a pessimistic angle. So use this as an opportunity to grow your employees into zones that they're usually not very good at. And the graphs here also show results from, when we actually tried it at InfoTech for a couple of weeks. We in fact just did it for a couple of weeks, 1 week without the caps, 1 week with the caps, which is 3 testers. And you can see the results right there in terms of both defects and the gaps in what we do, to basically bring in better contextual understanding of what we do as testers. That's idea number 1. Idea number 2, embrace games in software testing. So this is an idea that was brought to us as a keynote by Ross Smith. He heads the testing division for Skype at Microsoft. He's been collaborating with InfoTech for several such ideas to help us implement them. And he is in fact one of the global go-to persons when it comes to enterprise gamification. How can you bring games to the workplace? So here again, what is the problem statement? What is the need? Again, we as testers in the agile environment these days have a lot more opportunity to collaborate with the rest of the team. But there's still some isolation in what we do. So here the idea is, why don't we leverage games to be able to better collaborate with the rest of the product team? And the additional premise here is gaming is really gaining in popularity. So if you really take a global village of say about 100 people, say 60% of them are Asians, 11% are Europeans, 70% of them are gamers. That's what statistics say. Again, take a cross-section of children, just 20% of them know how to swim, 52% can ride a bike, whereas 58% can play games. So when such is the power of games, especially as the current generation is getting ready to enter the enterprise world, why don't we see how to bring games into the field of software testing? And then pick specific areas. Obviously games are not going to be useful across testing attributes. We'll pick specific areas where it's going to be useful. Areas such as functionality, localization, usability. I think these are areas where you can bring in that fun element to collaborate with the rest of the team also to do your testing efforts. And he gives the example of Windows 7, what they did at Microsoft with Windows 7. When Windows 7 was released in the 7 different languages, they had a core formal localization team. But in addition to that, they said, hey, at Microsoft, we have this huge, diverse international population. So why don't we build installable screens of Windows 7 just as a browser-based game? So let this international population play around with it, say during lunch breaks, coffee breaks, and give us feedback in terms of how the product is shaped. And the results, he says, were phenomenal. He says over 500,000 screens were evaluated, with over 4,500 players who played the game, and on an average 120 screens that were evaluated by the retester. So hand-picked areas, make this a Friday fun exercise. Maybe as part of bug bashes, instead of just doing it as a regular bug bash, you can make it a game. And there are a lot of frameworks that are going to help you support this. You may ask this question saying, how do we build games? Who's going to build games again? Maybe it could be left to a few gaming enthusiasts on the team. And there are a lot of frameworks, as I said. For instance, the 611 Robert Dillon framework was proposed by a person by the name of Robert Dillon, where he maps emotions, 6 emotions of joy, fear, anger, so on and so forth, to 11 different instincts, 11 different outcomes of being aggressive, taking the revenge, the greed factor. So multiple instincts that they can be mapped to. And when you're doing all of this, you're getting extra coverage, looking at the tester's emotions also in software testing. So this is idea number 2. So first idea was thinking caps for better context. The second idea, promote games for better collaboration. Let's move on to the third idea. Let's bring in mobile usability testing amongst all of us. Let it not be left to a few usability experts to do. So again, the way mobile computing has grown in the last 8-9 years needs no new introduction. Over 1 million applications that are available as of today. Global diverse personas at play, geographies, untouched geographies have been touched by mobile computing. And again, statistics say that 48% of users would walk away from an application if the mobile usability experience is not good. So the question I come here with is, if such is the power of good or not so good mobile usability, why should we leave it just to a few usability experts? I'm not doubting their capabilities, but all I'm propagating is, why don't we as testers, like functional, performance, security, also start appreciating the product from a mobile usability angle? Need not become an expert, let's just take a few simple traits. How simple the application is, how intuitive is it, how are error scenarios being handled. Just take a few such attributes and let's start acclimatizing ourselves to these few traits so we understand and appreciate the customer even better. Again, bunch of tools that are available in terms of best practices. It's not as difficult as it used to be in the past, where usability was relegated towards the end, you bring in a usability expert to do the study. It's not as difficult. You have a lot of tools like heat maps, tap and record software, screen resolution reading. So just play around with it. Whatever makes you curious, whatever is relevant for you, just pick those. And why don't we all start appreciating the product from mobile usability as well? And I'll give you a simple example here. So Sunsilk came out with this ad campaign, very simple ad campaign, right, for its shampoo. All it had in its layout was the shampoo, it had the model. And the initial frame, both of them were looking straight into the user's eyes. And of the 200 people that participated in the study, only 6% actually looked at the product. The remaining 94% looked at the model. Now, one small change they made the model now actually look at the product. And as soon as they did that, 84% of the people started looking at the product, which is exactly what Sunsilk wanted. So again, such can be the power of good usability. So let's all please start looking at mobile usability. Let's all start appreciating, because once we do that, we're able to better understand the customer. So idea number 3, let's promote mobile usability amongst all of us to be able to appreciate customers better. Idea number 4, this is sort of in continuation to the previous idea, automated your layout testing. Now again, given the matrix, the combinations that we test on, whether it's your devices, browsers, platforms, we all know the combinations have been growing leaps and bounds. We all acknowledge the importance of compatibility testing. But I think what's still happening is we look at compatibility primarily from a functionality approach. Is my application working fine across the various combinations? We've started made compatibility synonymous with functionality. But I think what's picking up steam is layout testing. How does my application render across varied screens, across varied devices? That's becoming equally important because that's the initial user experience that the end user is going to do. And even if we acknowledge that, oftentimes we don't pay as much attention because we don't really have the time to test for layout across the combinations. And a bunch of tools out of box available in the market as of today still handle them more at a static level. So with how responsive web design is picking up, I think there's ample scope for us to build automation frameworks here. Again, I'm saying this based on our experience in the last few months. We've built an automation framework on top of Selenium to basically test for automated layout testing, and clients are receiving them really well. So simple CSS style rendering where your automation can check for your application's layout is good. And when you do that, this is just a screenshot of one of the steps in our automation. It could be as simple as just calling the check layout method, and that method is going to adjust your browser size depending on the resolution you're testing on. And when you do this, clearly what's happening is you're able to give yourself a competitive advantage. Your competitors have probably not thought about this. They've probably thought about it only from a functionality level. So why don't we as testers look into this fourth area, which is automating your layout test to give yourself a better competitive advantage. The final idea, the fifth idea, let's acknowledge and adopt trends. Again, no new thing for me to come here and say that technology is changing at such a fast pace. The landscape is so dynamic, it's not going to be possible for us to become a master of everything. But I think what's important is to identify what our interests are, where the market is heading, and at least pick a few that we want to follow. Because firstly, it gives us a niche when we do that. Secondly, the company gets the niche as well when we do that. And a lot of speakers yesterday also spoke about these two topics. We at InfoTech, a couple of areas we've been closely following are wearable computing and augmented reality. We see a huge market in these two spaces. And I think wearable computing today is where mobile computing was, say, about 7 or 8 years ago. Potential is huge. Market is expected to reach a $30 billion size by 2018. Again, wearable computing, I don't have to explain what it is. Simple bodily worn computer that's capable of performing actions and giving you insightful information. Augmented reality is another really interesting thing. Again, we have a demo of augmented reality in our stall, so if you're interested in seeing it, please do come. But in simple terms, what this is drawing a connect between reality and the digital world. So a simple example. Say you're in a safari and your daughter is in your car. And out there at a distance you see an elephant. And your kid is interested in seeing that elephant up close. So you're able to just zoom in on your car's window and the elephant shows up close. That's one simple example. Or say I wear my Google Glass, I look up a tall building, and I'm easily able to figure out what rooms are available, which floor the rooms are available. That's another example. So you go to a shop, you have a shop's catalog, and you have the furniture out there. So with your augmented reality application, you're able to see how the furniture is going to fit into your room in real time, and make adjustments. So these are all very creative, very fun examples of augmented reality we're beginning to see. Again, the market is not very stable. As you go ahead trying these, you are going to face challenges. There are a bunch of challenges around security, around usability, around the price of some of these devices. But pick a few, whatever is going to interest you. Maybe it could be outside of work, or maybe it could align to your work as well. But when you do that, again, it's a great thing on your resume as well. You're giving yourself a niche. And maybe when your company is ready to move on to that particular space, you've given your company a edge as well. Because, again, most often we all know that when it comes to new technologies, adopting new technologies, testers have pretty much built in a reactive seat. The developers come in and tell us that we've moved already to the new technology, we have 1 week's time, please move on. So we're handcuffed at that time to really get ourselves ramped up and trade. So why don't we take this opportunity to start ways for better collaboration. We talked about mobile usability for customer appreciation, automating your layout tests for better competitive advantage, and finally, adopt and acknowledge trends. Be able to give yourself and your company the niche you deserve. So with that, one final takeaway message that ideas are really the seeds for innovation. It will be very difficult for me if anyone in this room stands up and says, I don't have ideas at all. Is there anyone? Is there anyone who would tell me I don't have ideas at all? No. So, we all have ideas. I think the difference really lies in which of us takes that step forward to really identify those ideas. That's the first step. I think most of us stop at that stage. We possibly identify our ideas, but we don't really move forward. The difference really comes in when we identify those ideas and work on them, applying our time, effort, and resources, because that's where true innovation really is done. So let's move forward with our ideas. Let not that fear of failure, let not that overvaluing of our ideas hold us back, because now is that time for innovation. In 2015, innovation is going to be the key in being able to differentiate yourself as a tester from the rest of the crowd. So take that step forward, aim high, pick targeted areas. You need not really have to go with all 5 that we discussed, but hopefully you can pick at least 1 or 2 that you can take back, start implementing in your organization, see that difference, and set yourself. Thank you so much. That's the message I want to share. Any questions?
Any questions, please?
I'm thinking from reference. We are given really a good thought for structured innovation. I would like to understand how to inculcate or encourage and get non-structured innovation in ways.
So, see, non-structured innovation as in, see, if you want to start it at a team level, as I said, it can, firstly, the awareness is very important. Unless people are even aware that they are capable of innovation and they are allowed to innovate at workplace, I think that is not going to start. So, firstly, the awareness is important. Secondly, maybe it need not be as structured as setting aside time. Maybe it could be a periodic brainstorm. We always have any new ideas. What is the market looking like in terms of our product? What is the competition saying? So it could be even as a manager, the manager can promote non-structured innovation through such brainstorm. Because when you start doing that, and when people start getting used to that routine, gradually you can then make it a part of your job. So I would say brainstorming is the first one. And also leading by example. I think that's very important, because all of these, it's very easier said than done. So you as a manager or you as a lead, whoever in whatever role you are, leading by example is also a perfect thing to start off innovation, whether structured or non-structured. I would say those 2 things.
Yeah, this is one thing. It was very my question is, I think the moving towards agile, a lot of those things, you always have a pressing need of deliveries, these, and in that context, how will you bring these elements? And based on your experience, is there any kind of a percentage that of the effort or whatever it is we need to allocate for these things explicitly to make it happen?
Sure. Very valid point, because it's always a balance that we're trying to struggle and achieve, right? One thing we did, so back in my earlier company, I used to manage a lot of projects for Microsoft. So one of the things we used to do was, why don't we explicitly bring quality milestone? That was one thing that we did, especially during holidays and downtimes. Each December, in fact, Microsoft has something called the Think Week, where people can submit ideas, they can submit papers. So identify maybe such downtimes when you can firstly propagate it. That could be one step. somewhere, someday, the first step has to be made. And maybe once you make that first step, you can gradually push an hour a bit, 2 hours here and there. So that could be done. So identify such downtimes. Identify maybe times when they're going for field trips, going to meet customers. They talk to them, it's not a scripted conversation that they have with the customer, right? So tell them that some of these you can do as part of your day-to-day operations as well. So identify areas for them that they can do: customer conversations, conversations with designers, conversations with competitive analysis that you can possibly take up, downtime analysis that you can do. So these 4 or 5 things, start it up that way. And once they see the value coming out of it, I think the product team itself will be more open to setting aside a formal chunk of time for innovation. In terms of time, the percentage that you asked, I think that's a very tricky question. It really, for instance, as I said, 3M sets aside 15%, Google sets aside 20%. 20% is a significant period of time. You also don't want to start investing that amount of time without seeing results, right? So that becomes then a complete waste in terms of proving to your management as well. So start with a small number, something as small as maybe 3% to 5%, where you're able to show the value, and then you don't have to justify to ask for a larger number. They'll come back to you, giving you the larger.
One last question.
Hi, I'm Surya from Does innovation have something to do with right brain or left brain? Do you manage innovation? And in your experience, what is the percentage of people in your team are able to follow it?
I don't help you with that scientific question there. Left brain, right brain, yeah? I'm just kidding. So honestly, left brain, right brain funda, I don't think I'm going to be able to do justice answering that question. A team, right, it's going to be made of a mix of things. Firstly, let's just get into this mindset that innovation is important. It's not just for the R&D group. We will innovate. When you go in with that conviction, I think left, right, everything will follow. That's just my personal take on it. So go in with that conviction. And secondly, when you ask me what percentage of people, if you take the bell curve, you're going to have all kinds of people in the team. But again, when you start leading by that example, you've created a contagious energy. Even people who are that FDH will follow. So go in with that conviction and just hopefully it is justice to this question.
Thank you, Rajini. That was a wonderful start to the meeting.
Thank you so much, guys.
Let me invite the second speaker for the day, Mr. Diva.